Thank you. When I was first asked to do this presentation, I was a little unsure, and have to say, when I walked in and was given this flyer with all the speakers here today, and there's half a dozen doctors and a handful of professors, and the others without those titles in front of their name of Orders of Australia or other such things. So I'm a little nervous presenting in front of such an esteemed audience, and I think I'm here basically for a little bit of light relief for you. Before I do go on and talk about software licensing, I do want to acknowledge that treating sick patients is a far more important way of life than trying to sell the next version of Windows or Office. But I do hope that I can give you a little bit of perspective of a different industry and take you on a journey and highlight some of the parallels between software licensing and the pharmaceutical industry, and how together we might be able to learn some things from each other and find new ways of monetising. How do I move this on? I've got the little clicker. This is, oh, there we go. I can do it magically by telepathy, which is pretty awesome. So what I'm going to do today is look through some of the attributes of software, and more as we move into the services industry, where the ideas for products come from, the evolution of software licensing, because what was very simple in the past is becoming more complex the more we move along. How software companies are moving up the value chain, and by that I mean from providing single point solutions or pieces of software up to full business solutions. More interesting, or the most interesting two slides, which they should be because they're at the end, which is where Richard asked me to look at if a company like Microsoft or another software company was looking to develop a drug or a cancer cure, how we might go about that and bring that to market. And then I'm going to close with some of the new emerging licensing trends that we're seeing in the market. And this is actually an area where I work, where my speciality is. I've negotiated very large and complex licensing solutions with governments and large commercial customers over the last 20 years really. And more recently, I'm in a group within Microsoft looking at incubation licensing. So looking at new ideas and how we can differently license our intellectual property. So if you have a look at the products, the attributes of a software product, I think you'll find that they tie pretty closely into the development of pharmaceutical drugs. So we have high upfront research costs. There's a lot of work that goes into the research and development of a piece of software. We have an iterative development process where we go out and we test the product and we build on it and produce new and better versions of that product. And at the end of the day, when we're distributing that product, the actual cost that a customer is paying is pretty much tied up in the intellectual property from that development, from that research and that development process. The actual cost of the physical distribution, be that via a CD or a memory stick or even downloaded over the internet, obviously is very low. And I know that the pharmaceutical companies get hammered all the time for, well, how can you charge thousands of dollars for a tiny pill? We get the same thing pointed at us. How can you charge so much for something that's free to download over the internet? Well, it's because of the intellectual property and because we need to sustain that development process. These very attributes lead to the point on the right, which is both industries suffer a very high risk of piracy. Software piracy costs the industry enormous amounts of money, and a day doesn't go by when my junk mailbox gets filled up with ads for off-market drugs for certain middle-aged men, diseases or other. So I think you'll find that these attributes of software look pretty familiar in the pharmaceutical industry. So what I'm hoping to do today is draw some parallels between how we bring our products to market and how perhaps we could look at funding and licensing drugs in the future. So where do the ideas for software come from? And again, I think you'll find there's some parallels here. We have research labs. Microsoft has a whole group called Microsoft Research. They don't produce product, they just sit back in their labs. Well, sit back, they do whatever they do. They probably lie on couches and blue sky. They come up with crazy ideas, things that may never actually see the light of day, but hopefully some of them are seeds of what we might need in the future. They do a lot of work into human interface, human-machine interface, looking at the way that we can monitor human activity. For those that ever get the opportunity to visit Microsoft campus in Redmond, try to get yourself a look at the Microsoft home of the future. One of the examples in there is looking at the rise of wearable technology and being able to, at home, have your heart rate, your VO2, all sorts of physical attributes constantly monitored, and your environment telling you and actually looking for warning signs, capturing that data if necessary, and if privacy allows, making that data available to clinicians, but looking for warning signs saying, oh look, your heart rate's been pretty high, your blood pressure's up, maybe you should go and see a doctor. Now, the technology today is very interesting and available. There are ethical concerns and privacy concerns, but that's what these guys do. They sit around thinking about what could we do with this specific little widget, what can we do from a in a future-looking sense. Obviously, we also do customer research. Our product groups get customers involved early on in the development cycle of products to try to ensure that what we're delivering is of benefit to those customers. If I use, again, a Microsoft example, Windows 10 has been launched. Through the development cycle of Windows 10, we had a program called the Windows Insider program. We had 7 million people sign up to that program who were testing pre-release versions of Windows 10 as it was going through the cycle and providing feedback. And a lot of the final features in Windows 10 have come from that feedback directly from the public, IT industry experts and also the general public. The last one's very interesting, which is trying to stay ahead of the game. In hockey parlance, trying to move to where the puck is, not where it's going to be, sorry, try to move to where the puck's going to be, not where it is right at this moment. Now, predicting the future can be very beneficial. If you get it right and you can leapfrog your competition and get ahead of the wave, you're in for a big winner. However, predicting the future is difficult. I'm sure most of you will be aware that last week on Friday was actually the date when Marty McFly travelled forward into the future from 20 years ago and discovered flying cars and all sorts of weird and amazing things that, of course, never saw the light of day. Some things they got right, and I'll touch on a couple of those in a minute. This all leads to what I call the market dichotomy. If we go and ask a customer specifically, and the old traditional software development route would be, we're building bespoke software, we go out and ask a customer, well, what do you want us to deliver? And they'll sit down there and they'll talk to you about features, and we want this, and we want a word processor, and we want a spell checker, and we want to do this, and we want to do that. What they rarely do is actually work together and say, this is the business problem that we're trying to solve. And so software development companies will sit down and they'll normally hive off the development over to a group in India, and 6 months later, something will come back and it won't be what they actually wanted. It might be what they asked for, but it probably won't be what they wanted. And there's a big chance that, in fact, the problem that they're trying to solve has moved on, and they're trying to solve for something that's no longer an issue. If we look at the other end, some of the most successful technologies that have been developed today, we didn't even know that we wanted. And in a software perspective, in my role, we use a lot of pre-release software. I am actually not, as you might have guessed, a PowerPoint expert. But when I was putting this deck together, I found a lot of the features in there that, oh, I didn't know it could do that. Oh, that's amazing. If I then go back to an older version of the software, I actually find it very hard to get stuff done. If we go back to the future, when Marty McFly went forward to October 2015, he found flying cars. He found fax machines in every room. Yes, you chuckle. What they actually got right, they didn't get the technology right, but what they actually found was we needed instant communication. We needed to be available. We needed a sports almanac. We needed to be able to look up results of any sports game ever played, or we need to look up, details about, whatever it might be. They got that bit right. What they got wrong was actually the technology that delivered it. 10 years ago, Apple introduced the iPhone and revolutionised essentially handheld computing. No longer was it just a mobile phone, it was a computer in your pocket. Now, others had tried before. The iPhone hit the mark. No one knew that they needed an iPhone 10 years ago, but I can bet your bottom dollar that the vast majority of people out there have got one in your pocket today. The access to information, that was the fax machine, that was the almanac, it's the internet. They didn't even pick the internet. The internet's come from nowhere, and today we could not do without it. These are the things where there are the surprise technologies that take seed. And the last one I've got there is the Microsoft HoloLens that was announced a couple of weeks ago with the Windows 10 launch, which is it's not a virtual reality, it's actually an augmented reality headset where you can wear it and you can see holograms that are mapped onto your own living space. And the predicted use here in health research and other industries, I think, is phenomenal. Now, we don't know exactly what it's going to do. In fact, I'm sure that a lot of people don't know exactly what use it's for. But I think things like this, being able to, if you're a mechanic out on an oil rig and being able to actually have the schematics presented in front of your face while you're working on a remote piece of equipment, is going to be the way of the future. So let's quickly look at the evolution of software licensing. Software licensing used to be very, very simple. We had a retail product. If you went into Harvey Norman and you bought a copy of Office, it was much like you were buying a mouse or a keyboard or a PC. It was a box, it had a CD inside it, and the CD was the thing you were buying essentially. You installed that in your on your PC, and if you wanted another copy, you bought another box. In the early days, there was certainly no copy protection on it, which of course led to the piracy boom, which a lot of the rest of the solutions have been trying to solve. Well, buying a box for every customer, for every user, is a very inefficient way of distributing software. So the individual license moved into a multi-license pack. It was a very similar concept, because things, we didn't see that far in the future. You buy a box, it'd have one CD, but it would give you the right to copy that onto 5 or 10 PCs. The rights to use that software were embedded in a piece of paper called the End User License Agreement, or we like to shorten things, so we call it the EULA. Again, there was no controls over the distribution, but you were paying for that right to use. This moved on to volume licensing. Large customers would get one CD, they'd distribute it, they'd put it on their servers, and they'd actually just report usage. And then so they could buy tens of thousands of copies of a piece of software without the need for actually buying tens of thousands of CDs. If we take that a step further, we get the concept of a site license. Now, I must stress, not all of these ideas are Microsoft ideas, but in the industry, some companies have such a thing as a site license. This might be an idea where you pay a fixed fee and you've got unlimited use of that software. It could be that if you have a portfolio of products, that you pay a fixed fee per user and you can use as many of them as you like amongst your user base. But you can see the way that we're building from that individual service around to basically, mass distribution of the software. Now, the fact that we can distribute software so easily brings me back to the point I made before about piracy. What we're seeing a move towards today is actually online activation. Now, we're trying to make it simple, and by we I mean the industry, trying to make it simple so that you don't always have to sit there and key in 20 character codes in order to unlock your software. But basically we have the advantage, which is something that the pharma industry doesn't have, that we can actually turn features on and off, and in this internet-connected world, even remotely, should the software be valid or otherwise. In each case, what we're trying to strike here is the balance between ease of use for the customer, our right to protect the intellectual property that we've invested in the product, and also providing fair value for the customers who are paying for the software legitimately. If we look at the move of software companies, most of us are moving away from here's an individual piece of software, here's an individual download, into the services industry. If we look at something like email, there's really no need for a customer today to be running their own email server. Email is available as a cloud service. You can pay someone to manage and run your email service. In the same way that 100 years ago, a lot of companies, a lot of organisations had their own power generation, generators, and they were generating their own electricity. Okay? Today you buy it off the grid. Obviously there are some situations where it's still advisable to do so, and we're living really in a hybrid world. The benefit here for both consumers and the supplier is that as the supplier moves up to more of software as a service and providing business value to the customers, customers have to worry less about the management and an uptake of that software. They also get budgetary certainty. They don't have to care about how many copies that they're running. They don't have to care about the server infrastructure. They don't have to care about the hardware or the electricity. They know that for each mailbox, they might pay $5 a month and have their mail looked after. For the supplier, it's the benefit of ongoing annuity software. No longer do we have to go out every time that someone wants to buy something else and say, here, buy another copy, please buy another copy. Even if you've got a maintenance program, they come up for expiry and you've got the situation, we've got the license, we want to go dark, we're not going to pay you any more money. It benefits the consumer, it benefits the supplier, and we're even seeing our customers who are moving more from, they're producing individual components to becoming, they want to make their products as a service. So this brings me to the crux of the presentation. If drugs were software. Now, how would a company like Microsoft go about developing a drug for, as an example, cancer? First of all, we'd identify who the target customers are, and in this case, I think it's unlikely to be the individual patients, although that's certainly a possibility. It is more likely to be the government and the health department, because we want to get that drug on the equivalent of the Australian PBS. The next step, and this is the tricky bit, is to actually determine what the requirements are. What are the political objectives? Don't worry about the actual what's written on there. This is just a slide I found that looked at requirements. What are the political objectives? What are the budgetary requirements? What are the outcomes that you're looking for? And this is the point I made before about being very clear on what the outcomes are rather than what the requirements are. Because based on that, we can come up with different models that might help achieve the right outcome. Now, this might be very boring, but the right solution may well be discrete licensing. It may well be that depending on the drug, depending on the requirements, depending on the size of the country, depending on many factors, actually paying for individual prescriptions might be the right way to go. One of the things more exciting is the concept of a volume licensing program for drugs. What if we were to go to the government and say, we've got this drug. It could be a single drug, it could be a portfolio of drugs. If we had a portfolio of drugs that were available and we went to the government and said, we'll license you this portfolio of drugs for X million dollars a year, $1 billion a year, I'm aggressive, X million dollars a year, and you, Mr. Government, can have the rights to, we'll supply all of our drugs to whichever of your patients needs it. Now you might say, there's cost of providing that. what I'm talking about here is licensing the actual intellectual property. There could also be a cost of supply. There could be a cost per prescription that gets recouped as far as producing the software goes. But if we think outside the box and think, well, okay, well, if we pay for this raft of drugs for the Australian population, whichever country we're talking to, all of a sudden you open up, we've got certainty of income. We know what we're going to get over the next few years. The government has budget certainty in knowing how much that those drugs are going to cost them. Over that period, we can then monitor what the actual usage is, and that can then set the scene for the next agreement moving forward and licensing. And our portfolio might have increased, the usage might have increased, the usage might have decreased. But it could take away the question of, well, this drug works for this patient, it should work for this patient, but we haven't funded it because they haven't got that particular type of cancer. It might open up some avenues for some more creative thinking. If we want to get really out there, let's look at some of the new ways that the IT industry is licensing stuff, and let's see if we can think about how they might apply in the drugs world. We're moving away from discrete purchasing to monthly subscription. And that could be per user. It could be, this is something like, if you think of something like Netflix or, whatever, or online services with, as I said before, your mail. You just pay per month per user. Is there something there that we could look at? Ad-supported software is a big part of where the industry is going, certainly in the consumer space. Something like Facebook, where you see you've got banner ads. Now, ads can be targeted, they can be very broad, they can be intrusive. You go onto YouTube, and if you want to watch a video, bang, you get an ad in front of your face and you have to sit there and watch it. Most people hate that, but it does help provide a service for free. There's a concept of freemium. Freemium means that the initial base service is free, but if you want a premium function of that software, you pay money to get that. And you've all probably seen examples in your kids might have Candy Crush on their phone. They get hooked, they want to buy something, they've got in-app purchases, they can pay more money and they unlock more and more features. These models aren't mutually exclusive. Part of the freemium model might be that you get a product that comes with ads, but you can pay to remove those ads. Now let's think about this in a treatment perspective, and this probably won't happen anytime soon, but imagine if you go in and you get your prescription for whatever it might be, and you get it from the chemist, and there are ads on the box. Now people might laugh, think, well, why would I want ads for the drug company? Well, it mightn't be ads for the drug company. In the ad-supported model, the product and the consumer actually get blurred. Google makes a lot of money providing you with free software and services because you are the product they're selling to the advertisers. Okay, and the ad on a box of paracetamol, could be for village movie tickets. Now you might think it's ridiculous, but if that helps keep the cost of the drugs down, maybe it's something worth looking at. Now you could have the choice. I'll have the, you walk into a chemist today and you get the generic brand or the branded brand, or you could have, well, I have the one with ads, I'll have the one without. This one's $5, this one's $10. It's a different funding model, it's a different licensing model. And finally, I'll just wrap up with the one that I think in my industry's, I think the most exciting trend we're seeing. This is in value sharing. This is basing the price that a customer pays for software on actual business outcomes. It might be that if we do a deal with BMW to help them become more productive in some such, that they pay by the number of cars they sell. Okay, it's got nothing to do with the software that they're using, but the direct outcome or the measurable outcome of what they're licensing from us might be that they can produce more cars. Now, in this model in the drugs world, it could be, well, what if the model was, if a patient gets diagnosed with a specific cancer, the cost for the whole course of treatment, regardless of how long it lasts, is a fixed price. We license that user, that patient, for the treatment they need. It could be that this drug, promises increased lifespan. Well, maybe those patients that get treated with that drug, if the company is that dependent that they know that this is going to work, maybe the increase in average lifespan of patients using that drug is actually what they get paid on. Okay? These things are out there. I can't see many of them happening in the very near future, but what I wanted to bring to you today was just some ideas from a different industry that I think do have some parallels with your industry. I hope it's been of interest. I'm getting the wind up, so I'm going to disappear, and I'm going to hand over to, I think it's Dr. Nick somewhere or other, to talk about alternate funding models.